Hello, and welcome to The Brief Insight, your go to podcast for breaking down the latest trends, research, and policies shaping our world. Whether you're passionate about sustainability, global economics, or emerging innovations, this is where we simplify complex ideas to keep you informed and inspired. If you enjoy what you hear, don't forget to like this episode, subscribe to our channel, and share it with anyone looking for insights that matter. We're here every Monday and Friday, so hit that notification bell to stay updated. Your support helps us grow and continue bringing you sharp, relevant content that sparks conversation. Thank you for tuning into The Brief Insight. Now let's dive into today's topic.
I want you to do something for just a second.
Yeah.
Like, actually look around your current environment right now.
Yeah, really take stock of what's physically around you.
Right. Look at the phone sitting next to you. Look at the browser you're using to listen to this deep dive right now. Think about the cloud services that are holding, every single photo of your family, your emails, your entire digital history.
All of it.
Now ask yourself, what would actually happen if you tried to cut all of it out of your life today? Like, just completely pull the plug on the giants.
I mean, it's a terrifying thought experiment for most people. The moment you start mapping out the dependencies, you realize just how tangled the web really is.
Exactly. And that's exactly why we're here. Welcome to today's deep dive. We are looking at a massive, and I mean fascinating, stack of sources today.
Oh yeah, it's a huge stack.
We've got personal tech boycott experiments, geopolitical analyses, academic papers on international sanctions, and even some hardcore telecom data. Our mission here, to understand the inescapable gravity of big tech.
And really to answer the ultimate question based on these sources, which is, are we trapped by these companies or do we, desperately need them to survive the future?
Right. But before we get into the weeds, we should probably define who we're actually talking about, right? Because the terminology has definitely shifted.
It has, yeah. For a long time, the focus was entirely on the big five.
Right. So that's Alphabet Google's parent company, Amazon, Apple, Meta, and Microsoft.
Exactly. Those were the consumer-facing giants.
Yeah.
But financial analysts and, the sources we're looking at today, they now focus on the Magnificent Seven.
The Magnificent Seven. Sounds like a movie.
Right. But it just adds NVIDIA and Tesla to that original list.
Which totally makes sense.
Yep.
Because we're moving from just, software and ads into the physical hardware and AI processing that actually runs the modern world.
Precisely. And geopolitically, we really can't ignore their international counterparts either. The landscape now includes the BayTX.
BayTX.
Yeah, Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent, and Xiaomi out of China. So what we are looking at is a deeply concentrated global oligopoly.
I love how the sources approach this too, because before we even zoom out to international geopolitics or global supply chains, we really have to understand the personal lock-in, right?
Yeah, the everyday individual level.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The psychological and functional hold these companies have on just one single person. There's this incredible experiment in our stack from tech journalist Kashmir Hill.
Oh, this was wild.
Right. She actually tried to do what I just asked you, the listener, to imagine. She built a custom VPN to completely block the tech giants from her life.
And the technical mechanics of what she had to do are just mind-boggling. I mean, to block these companies, you can't just, delete their apps from your phone.
That'd be way too easy.
Right. Her custom VPN had to actively block their specific IP addresses.
Which are the unique numerical labels assigned to every device connected to a network, right?
Exactly. And I think people assume a company has, maybe a few dozen IP addresses?
Or a few hundred.
Try millions? The numbers are staggering. To sever ties, she had to block Amazon, which controls over 23 million IP addresses.
Wait, 23 million individual IP addresses. Why on earth do they need that many?
Because Amazon isn't just a store where you buy batteries, Amazon Web Services, AWS, essentially hosts a massive chunk of the entire internet.
Oh, right.
Countless independent websites, streaming services, databases, they all rent server space from Amazon. So when you block Amazon's IPs, you aren't just blocking Prime delivery, you are breaking your access to half the web.
Wow. Okay, that makes the data she tracked make total sense then. Because before she turned this custom block on, her VPN showed her normal internet usage. She was generating about 2 million data packets a day.
And just for context, a data packet is a tiny unit of data sent over a network. Every time a page loads, an email syncs, or an app refreshes in the background, packets are flying.
Well, 60% of her 2 million daily data packets were going straight to these giants. Over half of her digital existence was routed through them by default.
Yeah. And actually severing that connection required a drastic hardware pivot. She couldn't just use normal
Oh,
devices.
it was a total lifestyle regression.
Yeah.
She obviously couldn't use a MacBook or an iPhone to bypass Apple. She had to buy an open source Librem 13 laptop.
Which is such a niche device.
It is. And I found this detail fascinating. That specific laptop has a physical hardware kill switch for the microphone and camera. Not a software setting you click, but a physical breaker.
Because that's the only way to genuinely ensure privacy nowadays.
Exactly. And for her phone, she had to go to Target and buy a retro, bright orange Nokia 3310 flip phone.
Which perfectly illustrates the core issue here. The transition was agonizing, not just because the new tools were clunky, but because of the sheer social friction of leaving the ecosystem.
I always compare the Apple ecosystem to renting a luxury hotel room versus owning your own house.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, like in the hotel, everything is beautifully designed, the sheets are crisp, room service is convenient, everything just works. But the company holds the keys.
And they can change the locks at any time.
Exactly. They monitor who comes and goes, and you don't actually own the space you're living in. But leaving that luxury hotel means you have to go out into the woods and build your own house from scratch with hand tools.
That is a perfect analogy. And the hotel management makes sure that building your own house is socially exhausting. You see this when she went back to using that orange Nokia. She had to rely on T9 typing.
Oh man, T9. Right, pressing the number 1 3 times just to type the letter C.
Yeah, brutal. But the mechanical difficulty paled in comparison to the social cost. By leaving the ecosystem, she lost iMessage. She instantly became the dreaded green bubble in her group chats.
The green bubble shame is real.
It is. Her friends literally thought she was traveling internationally or that their phones were broken because her messages were reacting differently.
The walled garden turns your own friends against you for leaving. It's wild. And there was this one detail from her experiment that absolutely stopped me in my tracks.
Oh, the contacts thing.
Yes. When she got the orange Nokia, she obviously couldn't just sync her iCloud to get our contacts back. She had to manually port them over. She looked at the 1,528 contacts hoarded in her iPhone.
Which is so many people.
Right. But when forced to actually type them in one by one, she realized she only needed 143 of them.
And that number, 143, is incredibly revealing. It perfectly aligns with Dunbar's number.
I've heard of that. That's the evolutionary limit on friendships, right?
Essentially, yes.
So,
Proposed by British anthropologist Robin Dunbar, it's the suggested cognitive limit to the number of people with whom a human being can maintain stable, meaningful social relationships.
and what's the number?
It is scientifically estimated to sit right around 150.
So all that seamless hotel convenience was just allowing her to hoard data on over 1,000 people she didn't even interact with.
Pretty much.
It really makes you wonder. If you, listening right now, lost your cloud backup today and were handed the blank phone, how many of your contacts would actually make the cut?
Would you even have the phone number of your closest friend memorized?
Probably not. It's a sobering reality check on how much of our basic memory has been outsourced. But, this lock-in we were talking about isn't just about consumer software or iMessage or iCloud.
No, not at all.
The physical fundamental components that make modern technology function are just as tightly controlled. I mean, if an individual journalist with specialized tech knowledge can barely quit big tech, what happens when an entire nation-state tries to?
That's where the sources shift from personal psychology to global hardware chokeholds. The specific case study they use is the U.S. sanctions against Huawei.
Right. A few years ago, the U.S. placed Huawei on the entity list, essentially cutting off their legal access to U.S. origin technology.
Huge deal at the time.
And my initial reaction reading this was, wait, Huawei is a massive Chinese conglomerate. At the time, they were the world's second largest smartphone maker. If they get cut off, surely they have the billions of dollars required to just write a new operating system and print their own chips.
You would think so, right? But you can't just throw money at this problem because of the sheer mechanics of the modern supply chain.
How so?
Well, a smartphone is not a single product. It is an aggregation of highly specialized intellectual property inextricably linked to the United States and its allies.
Okay, break that down for me. What exactly are they relying on that they can't just copy?
Let's look at three critical layers. First, the chip architecture. Almost every premium smartphone relies on architecture licensed from ARM.
At ARM?
Yeah, a UK-based company. They provide the fundamental blueprint for how the phone's brain processes instructions. Because ARM's designs contain US origin technology, the sanctions blocked Huawei from using them.
And you can't just invent a new language for a processor overnight.
Exactly. Second, there's the operating system. Huawei used Google's
So
Androids.
wait, Android is open source, isn't it? Anyone can use the base
The
code.
base code, yes. But a modern smartphone is virtually useless to a consumer without GMS.
Google Mobile Services.
Right. That's the proprietary layer that gives you the Google Play Store, Gmail, YouTube, and the background location services that run apps like Uber. You can fork the open source code, but without GMS, you just have an empty shell.
Got it. And the third layer?
The physical radio frequency, or RF, components.
Oh, the parts that actually connect the phone to the cell tower.
Exactly. These components translate digital signals into cellular waves. And the market for high-end RF components is dominated by U.S. companies like Qorvo and Skyworks.
So it's not just software.
No, this involves decades of highly specialized, patented materials science. A multi-billion-dollar company can't just replicate that in a few months.
So if the supply chain has these incredibly deep patented hooks, I have to ask, who actually feels the pain of these sanctions? Like, if the U.S. government pulls this lever to punish a Chinese tech giant, does the collateral damage hit the intended target?
That is the exact question a fascinating academic study from KU Leuven investigated. They wanted to measure the real-world fallout of these policies.
And what do they find?
Well, their research confirmed that the sanctions did mechanically work in terms of hurting Huawei's bottom line. Huawei's global profits plummeted, and they were forced to divest and sell off their sub-brand Honor just to keep it alive.
Right.
But the unintended victims were not who you would expect.
Well, it certainly wasn't the American consumer. Huawei was barely a blip in the U.S. smartphone market to begin with because carriers didn't offer their phones.
Right. The study found that European consumers bore a massive, measurable welfare loss.
The European consumers, not the U.S. imposing the rule, not China receiving it.
Yeah.
Consumers in entirely separate sovereign nations absorbed the blow.
Yes, because Huawei phones were wildly popular across Europe. When the U.S. sanctions hit, the new devices European consumers had access to were suddenly degraded.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, a teenager buying a phone in Berlin or Paris couldn't get a Huawei with 5G capabilities because the chips were blocked. They couldn't access Google Maps or the Play Store. So a policy signed in Washington directly reduced the quality and competition of products available to consumers in a third-party market thousands of miles away.
Which paints a terrifying picture. Because if the physical smartphone supply chain is this unbelievably centralized, what happens with the next frontier?
AI.
Exactly. Reading through the sources, we are seeing this exact same dynamic play out with artificial intelligence, but the walls to the castle are even higher.
They are significantly higher. AI infrastructure is practically an impenetrable fortress. And this brings us to the deep geopolitical anxieties surrounding a concept experts are calling the AI kill switch.
The AI kill switch.
Yeah.
To really grasp the panic here, we have to look at the speed of adoption. We have a graph in the sources comparing how long it took different technologies to reach 100 million users.
And the visual is striking.
It really is.
Yeah.
It took Netflix years of mailing DVDs and building streaming infrastructure. It took Twitter years to build a user base.
Yeah.
But for ChatGPT, the growth line on the graph isn't a curve. It's practically a vertical line.
Straight up.
Yeah, it hit those milestones in an absolute fraction of the time. The global dependency on AI is forming overnight.
And here is where that kill switch mechanism becomes critical. The world's most capable AI models don't just exist as invisible magic in the sky.
Right.
They run on massive, centralized, US-based cloud infrastructure, specifically Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, and Google Cloud. Furthermore, they are trained and operated almost exclusively on US-designed chips, primarily from NVIDIA.
Okay, let's translate that jargon for a second. When we talk about an API kill switch or denying compute, what does that actually mean in physical reality for someone trying to build a business outside the US?
Well, an API, or application programming interface, is just the bridge that allows a foreign app to talk to an AI model. So if a startup in London builds an app powered by an American AI, every time a user types a prompt, that app sends code across the ocean to a server in Virginia to be processed and sends the answer back.
And the compute.
The compute is the actual physical processing power of those NVIDIA chips doing the math.
So if you rely on that bridge, the US entity on the other side can just close the door. They can revoke the API access, refuse the connection, and your entire application goes completely blind and powerless instantly.
Exactly. It would immediately paralyze the technological advancement of whoever was cut off.
Wow.
If you are a foreign government or a major international corporation, your entire future economic strategy relies on integrating AI into your industries. If the United States controls the cloud servers and the chip designs, they effectively hold a kill switch for your entire economic growth.
So if I put myself in the shoes of a leader in Europe or the Middle East, I'm looking at how the U.S. kneecapped Huawei's hardware, and I'm looking at this API kill switch, and I'm panicking. Doesn't holding that much power over the globe's future economy inherently force other countries to panic and try to build their own?
It absolutely does. And that deduction is exactly what is driving the current global push for sovereign AI. Countries are terrified of this dependency.
So they're scrambling to build their own.
Exactly. We are seeing this clearly with companies like Mistral in France and the Falcon models in the United Arab Emirates. The goal is to have proprietary models trained on their own cultural data, running on physical infrastructure located within their own borders that they completely control.
Which brings up a fascinating point from the sources. We keep using the word cloud, which sounds, light and airy.
Very ethereal.
Right. But these sovereign ecosystems and American tech monopolies are intensely physical. They require massive amounts of land, astronomical amounts of power, and intense political negotiation.
The physical footprint of the internet is staggering, which brings us to an industry myth that the telecom data in our sources completely debunks.
Oh, the Northern Virginia myth. If you follow tech at all, you have absolutely heard this rumor repeated as gospel.
Oh, constantly.
The rumor is that 70% of the entire world internet traffic physically flows through Northern Virginia. You see it in economic reports, local news articles, everywhere.
But when you look at the actual mechanical telecom data, it is mathematically impossible.
How so?
The United States as a whole only handles about 25% of global international bandwidth.
Because subsea cables connect other continents directly to each other now, right? They don't all route through the U.S. anymore.
Exactly. So the claim that 70% of global traffic hits one specific U.S. state is simply false.
And here's where it gets really interesting. Even with that myth totally busted, the sources show that Northern Virginia is still the undisputed data center capital of the world.
Without a doubt.
It is a physical behemoth. The metric they use is megawatts of capacity, which measures the immense power required to run and cool these servers. Northern Virginia generates 4,140 megawatts of data center capacity.
And to put that scale into perspective, the next closest global competitor is Beijing, sitting at just 1,860 megawatts. Virginia dwarfs the second-place city by more than double.
And that kind of physical density comes with a terrifying environmental toll. The numbers in the deep dive sources are unbelievable. Big tech now accounts for roughly 4% of total global greenhouse gas emissions.
Which, to give that context, is more than the entire global aviation industry combined.
Think about that. Every single commercial flight, cargo plane, and private jet in the sky right now, big tech emits more.
It's wild.
In 2023 alone, Google and Microsoft each consumed 24 terawatt-hours of electricity just to keep their data centers running.
And 24 terawatt-hours is difficult to conceptualize, so let's compare it to nations. That is more power than entire countries consume in a year.
Wait, really? Entire countries?
Yes. It's more than the annual power consumption of Iceland or Ghana, just for one single company's server farms to process our searches and AI prompts.
And looking at the sources, what's fascinating is that this colossal physical, environmental, and social footprint has put big tech in the crosshairs of literally every political faction, though for wildly different reasons.
Oh, absolutely. It's a perfect storm.
Now, the deep dive outlines the critiques impartially, but it's really interesting to see the different angles. From the left-wing perspective, critics highlight the massive concentration of corporate wealth, the severe environmental damage we just discussed, and the failure of these platforms to adequately stop the spread of misinformation.
Meanwhile, right-wing critics attack from a completely different angle. They point to what they allege is an inherent liberal bias within the corporate structures of these companies. They heavily criticize the perceived censorship of conservative viewpoints.
Right.
And they specifically target protections under Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act,
which is the specific U.S. law that allows platforms to evade the traditional legal responsibility that a publisher has for the content its users post.
Exactly.
And then, adding to the mix, you have libertarian critics who oppose any government regulation or intervention at all, arguing for pure free market principles to sort it out. The point the sources make is that big tech is a universal target. Everyone is scrutinizing them.
Which naturally leads to the regulatory response. I mean, given the environmental cost, the political friction, and the monopolistic lock-in that traps both individuals like Kashmir Hill and entire foreign nations, the instinctual reaction of lawmakers is to regulate them, break them up, shrink them.
And the European Union is currently leading that charge with aggressive new laws like the Digital Markets Act, the DMA, and the Digital Services Act, the DSA, trying to force these walled gardens to open their gates.
Right.
But one of the academic papers in our stack offers a wildly counterintuitive solution to this problem.
Yes, the paper by Desur, Morel, and Webster. As we've established, the EU is terrified of what they call digital colonialism. Right now, 92% of European data sits in US-owned clouds.
Wow, 92%.
Yeah, the EU desperately wants digital sovereignty. But this paper argues a very uncomfortable truth. True digital sovereignty is actually impossible without big tech.
I absolutely love the analogy the authors use for this. It's like complaining about a dragon guarding your castle, but realizing you actually need the dragon because the surrounding woods are full of wolves you can't fight yourself.
It's a great visual. And the wolves, in the modern digital context, are highly sophisticated state-sponsored hackers, aggressive cybercriminal syndicates, and ransomware gangs.
Let's expand on that mechanically. Why can't the guards, meaning a standard business or a local European government, fight off the wolves themselves?
Because the modern IT infrastructure has become too incredibly complex. The average enterprise or even a mid-sized government agency simply does not have the technical expertise, the budget, or the scale to secure their networks against state-level threats.
But the dragon does.
Exactly. What the Dragon Big Tech has is telemetry. Telemetry is the sheer, unfettered visibility of global network traffic.
Okay, so what does that look like in practice?
If a cyber attack is quietly forming on servers in Asia, a localized European cloud provider won't see it coming until it hits their front door. But a giant like Microsoft or Google sees the traffic anomalies globally in real time. They can analyze the threat and deploy a patch worldwide before the attack ever lands.
And the sources point to the outbreak of the Ukraine war as the ultimate proof of concept for this, right?
They do. When the conflict began, big tech companies stepped in and utilized their sheer scale to identify destructive cyber attacks aimed at Ukrainian infrastructure and systematically blocked them across their global networks.
That's incredible.
They effectively protected a sovereign nation's digital infrastructure because they were the only ones with the server capacity and threat intelligence massive enough to absorb the blow.
So what's the paper's proposal then?
Therefore, the paper proposes a radical paradigm shift. Rather than pouring all our energy into trying to curb big tech's power or fine them into submission, we should legally force them to use their massive infrastructure to provide baseline, enterprise-grade cybersecurity for the entire world as a default condition of operating.
Treat them like a public utility. Like, if you build a house, you expect clean water from the tap and stable electricity from the wall socket without having to be a civil engineer.
Exactly.
The argument is that if you plug a business into the internet today, you should automatically receive elite cybersecurity provided by the giants, because they are the only entities large enough to actually provide it. Don't fight their monopoly size, harness it to protect everyone else.
It's a profound shift in thinking. It requires acknowledging that the exact scale that makes these companies an uncomfortable monopoly is the exact same scale required to defend the modern digital world from collapse. They have essentially transitioned from being active participants in the free market to becoming the physical and structural infrastructure of the market itself.
So let's bring this all together. Big tech isn't just a collection of really successful companies selling us slick smartphones and highly targeted advertisements. They are the absolute landlords of our personal social lives, determining whether we have 150 friends or 1,000.
Yeah.
They are the choke points of global hardware supply chains, capable of degrading a consumer's phone on another continent. They are the gatekeepers to the entire artificial intelligence revolution. And ironically, they are potentially the only entities large enough to protect the global internet from collapsing under the weight of modern cyber threats.
Which leaves us with one final, crucial idea to mull over as we conclude this deep dive.
What's that?
If these 5 to 7 companies are providing our fundamental public utilities, if they are defending international borders in cyberspace, and if they are single-handedly dictating global trade via access to their APIs and compute power,
Right.
at what point do they stop being traditional corporations and start becoming digital nation states?
That is a wild thought. I want to challenge you, the listener, to look at your phone one more time before you put it down. Notice the operating system running it. Look at the specific apps on the screen. Think about the cloud connection, silently backing it all up. Realize how deeply intertwined your daily, mundane existence is with those massive server farms humming in Northern Virginia and the APIs in Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
You aren't just buying a product anymore. You are opting into an ecosystem that dictates global geopolitics.
And if these companies truly are the new borderless nation states of the 21st century, what does that make us? Are we just users bound by terms of service, or are we effectively their citizens?